I'm Eric, and in this video, I'm going to live to tape some updates to the Threads feature on Pewter. I'm actually doing this concurrently while I'm recording a video on making a chat app that uses Pewter's Threads feature. This is the chat app I'm creating, and there are two missing things in the Threads feature that I don't have that I'd like to have to finish this chat app. The first one is user information attached to messages in a thread, or I should say child threads of a thread, which is what I'm calling messages. This is allowing me to put a username on each of the messages from a real user that sent the message without adding extra application logic to handle this for me. The other thing that I'm missing is a way to subscribe to a thread's changes to get updates through Pewter's WebSocket connection. Right now, the only way to get changes is through polling, which isn't quite as efficient as the WebSocket's approach. In this video, I'm going to be adding these two changes so that I can proceed to work on this chat app. The first thing I'm going to do is add user information to Threads. This is going to be a little bit easier than subscriptions because I'm not entirely sure yet how I'm going to implement that so that subscriptions don't stay open when an app closes. That will be a little complicated. So I'm going to do this first. If I run threads.list, if I call that in this DevTools window that I have open for this Pewter session, I will see a list of child threads of that thread, or sometimes we might call them messages. And we can see we have the UUID of the parent thread, text, and then the UUID of this thread, but we don't have any user information. Uh, we do have a user ID associated with the thread that we're not sending to the client because it's a database ID. So let's look at the list endpoint, which is over here. List UUID of the thread, and it's paginated, so we have to go through the pages until we get an empty result back. And we can see this this function here. Each thread is being transformed with this map here with a method called client save thread. And client save thread just provides the information for the thread that we're willing to send to the client. We need to add information about the user. So first we need to get the user. So there's a helper method called getUser. I think there's also a getUser service. This would be the more modern way to do this right now. If I go to helpers.js in backend actually, and go to the implementation of getUser, we'll see that it is actually just calling the getUser service. So there's really not much of a difference between these two approaches. But this will allow me to get it from the services container belonging to the service, which is just a little bit better. Allows us to do some dynamic code instrumenting and track what's going on a bit better if we end up doing that at some point. So I'm going to call the getUser method on that service, and I am going to pass it an ID, and it is going to be thread.ownerUserID. That's the owner. This method is asynchronous, so we need to await it. That means client save thread also needs to be asynchronous, and it is not, which means this map won't work either unless we do promise.all and await that, and make this async. So this is now an asynchronous operation because we need to get user information, and adding promise all here will basically map these threads to the promise that this method returns, and then we're going to wait for all those promises to resolve and return the array of whatever the promise is resolved with, which is exactly what we want. And we need to make sure that this is client safe user information too. And I'll demonstrate what happens if we don't do that right now. So I've just reloaded the server off to the side where you can't see. And I'm going to run this again. And I actually get a 500 error because If I check my server console here, it says I can't read properties of undefined services. So I must have made a mistake here. It says it happened on line 434, which is this. I'm calling this dot services, so that's a bit surprising. It would imply that this is undefined. That makes perfect sense. And if you don't see exactly why right now, I'll explain that. This dot client safe thread is a method until we pass it to something. Then it's a function. It's not bound to the instance anymore. We're just passing this function without the instance. But we can fix that um, using dot bind. So you can use dot bind on any function to set the instance variable as if you were calling it on an object. So if I reload the server now, and I'm just waiting for that to finish restarting. Okay, now if I call it, it works. And we can see we have user information. We don't have user information here yet, actually. I'm not sure. I'm not yet sure why. Oh, it's because I never passed the user object, or never assigned user on this object that I'm returning here. So another reload. And here we are. We have user objects, but these user objects contain database IDs, all kinds of sensitive information. So what we want is a client safe user object. I'm just going to see if there's something called client safe user in the code. We don't seem to have that. I'm going to see what whoami service does because we do return user information there. And this is specifically catered to the whoami endpoint, so that might not be a good reference. So let me think of another place where we pass user objects to the client. I know that things like apps and subdomains, they have users associated with them, and they all go through something called the entity storage interface, which has something called a reference type. So I'm going to go here because I happen to know this is where properties for the entity storage system are defined. And there is a type called reference here. Reference. And models are defined under mappings. So we have prop types and mappings. Models describe kind of what the properties of each data type are. And I'm going to look at subdomain. We have owner. Owner is a reference type. And we have a permissible subproperties part defined. So we're providing the username and UUID. And let me see if we do the same thing for apps. We do the same thing for apps. So I'm going to make it consistent with the entity storage system, and I'm going to provide the username and UUID from thread service here. So we'll do it like this. Username is going to be user.username, UUID is user.UUID. My intention here is to provide as little information as possible while still being convenient for the developer. The reason I want to provide as little information as possible is that people don't have expectations about this interface that might be different in other areas of Pewter. If we decide to include many properties, some might include some where others don't, if that makes sense. In this way, we can provide, for example, an endpoint to get whatever additional details about a user the developer is allowed to access if they need that extra information instead of providing it here. So now that I have that, I can reload the server again, which is off to the side. You can't see it. And now I'm going to call this again. And now we have all the information we need and only the information we need to display the username. Eventually, to make our chat app better, of course, we would want to fetch the profile of a user. I'm not entirely sure the state of profiles right now. We might need to add some more capability to that. But Now this part's done. We have user information on the threads, and now I can move on to the harder part of allowing a WebSocket subscription to a thread within an app. Okay, now it's time for subscriptions, which slightly I'm dreading because there are only a few places where things interact with WebSockets right now, and none of them quite with the same requirement of an app needs to have the subscription and it needs to go away when the app is closed. What I want to do is have something like this where we call subscribe on pewter.threads, and then we have a subscription. It calls an endpoint on the back end that subscribes us, and then we start getting messages through WebSockets. But I can't quite have it work like that. Having it as an endpoint means I don't really have information about the WebSocket connection. I just have information about the user. And I really want it to be tied to a specific instance of a WebSocket connection with Pewter's backend. For example, the one inside of a Pewter app rather than the one in Pewter desktop. I can still have a pewter.threads.subscribe, but it needs to work a bit differently under the hood. So let's take a look at the threads Pewter.js module. So this is pewter.threads inside the browser. All of these make a request using the fetch API. They make a request using fetch to the server. But the subscribe method, it's going to need to send a WebSockets message. Because if I send a WebSocket message, then the server has information about the WebSocket connection through which I would like to subscribe. There were a couple of other approaches that I thought of. One was that apps communicate to Pewter Desktop through post message, and only Pewter Desktop is allowed to subscribe using an HTTP endpoint, and we subscribe just to the user generally, but desktop manages canceling that subscription if the app closes without canceling that subscription. That works when you're running an app under Pewter's desktop, but we also have the ability for you to have a website that includes the pewter.js script tag and interfaces with Pewter. It wouldn't work in that case because then you don't have Pewter desktop to facilitate creating the subscription. So we really do need the app to create the subscription directly to Pewter's backend, and through the WebSocket is the only way I can see to do that. So I'm going to start looking into the details of this, and you'll see my progress in this next video clip.
An unspecified amount of time in the future.
I may have struggled a little bit to get sockets working.
And now, back to your regularly scheduled programming, which is further in the future. It's still chronological.
I just finished writing code to handle subscriptions for threads, and I'm about to do my first test, so I'm going to go over what I've done so far. In thread service, I added this initialization function called initSocketSubs, and I just call that in the init method of the service, which is called when Pewter starts. I create a data structure, which is just an object of UUIDs of threads to sets of socket IDs that are listening to the thread. So that's UUIDs of threads to socket ID, a set of socket IDs of listeners. When I get the user connected runtime event, so these are different from the boot time events, which are static methods on services. This I need to listen to from the event service. When I get a user connected, I bind some listeners to the socket that was connected from that user. So on disconnect, I would remove any subscriptions that user's WebSocket connection had for threads. And then I listen to sub request and sub cancel. So thread.sub request is what the user's browser is going to send when they want to subscribe to a particular thread, and we just add their socket ID to a set that's associated with the thread ID. And similarly for cancel, we remove a socket ID that's associated with the thread that they specified. Then I added a method on thread service called notify subscribers, which is going to be called by the other endpoints in thread service. And it just sends a message to all the socket IDs specified for the associated thread. So that's pretty straightforward so far. And because we know we'll receive this socket disconnect event, whether or not it was explicitly sent from the browser, right? If the tab is closed or something, we'll also discard it. We're not going to end up with lingering subscriptions that aren't needed anymore, most likely. Lower down in threadservice.js, so I just have the same file on the right hand side here. I have a call to notify subscribers from the create endpoint. So this is /thread/create. So if you have post permission, you can create a thread with a parent thread, and that will notify the subscribers of. Right now, it's of the thread. I kind of let Copilot take the wheel there, but this should be parent UID, right? We want to notify subscribers of the parent thread, and I'm going to call this post. And let's see if we can. Oh, actually, no. This is UID. Parent UID is that one. That's where we're sending the event to. We're sending the event to subscribers of the parent thread. So let's do the first test and see how it goes. I'm going to reload the server just in case I hadn't done that yet. And the first thing I need to do is subscribe to some thread that I know exists. I'm going to hit up in my history until I find this thread UID, which is the one I've been testing with. I'm going to copy that. And then I'm just going to go back down. Okay, I'm going to go here. So this should, in theory, subscribe me to that thread. I'm going to open the network tab here too so we can see the WebSocket connection. I'm not sure which one this is yet. So I'll try this first. I did not see an error of any kind. I don't think I have logs here yet. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a thread that has that parent thread as its parent thread and see if that works. So let me just find one here where I did that. I might have to reference the code in a moment. Okay, now here we go. I'm going to call this, my face is in the way, which is kind of annoying. Okay, we'll call this another new post. And let's take a look at the WebSocket events. Okay, this is fantastic. I got thread.post, I got the event, and I got the text. So that means this is working. Now I need to test unsubscribing to the thread. So what I'm going to do is emit sub.cancel with that same UUID. So that's canceled now. We can see that up here. It's kind of hard to see because everything's squished up because of my camera thing here. But let's create another new post. And we'll see I did not get a subsequent thread.post event. I only have the first one that just says another new post. So that's great news. That means this works perfectly. So I'm going to proceed to test this a bit more, and I think that's it. When I said "and I think that's it," I was kind of jumping the gun because the next step is to put this notify code on each of the possible events, because we want to know not only if something was posted, but we also want to know if something was edited. So this is edit, and do we have UID in the scope? We do. So we need that. Do we need the user information if something was edited? I would say no. No, we don't. Because we don't actually know what user edited it. We just know the owner. So that information would be confusing if it was in that event. So this is delete. So when something's deleted, we probably want to send delete. We don't need user or text information this time. For read, no event for read list, no event for list, and that should be everything. So if I go back to the console here, and I once again, let's see, subscribe to that thread, right? So we'll see that in here. Now I'm going to do an edit. Do we have an example of an edit here already? Maybe. Yeah, there's an example of an edit. I need a UUID of a thing to edit, so I'm just going to comment that out for now, and then go back to where I called list earlier, which I think I did. I really wish this had the control R thing of bash, because clicking up this many times seems incredibly silly. Let's see, we have this UUID, another new post. So what I called that one, I'm going to copy its UUID, and then I'm going to edit it, and we should get an event for this through the WebSocket. I don't see it there actually. So let's see if I did something wrong, or maybe I'm looking at the wrong socket. I don't really see it in any of the other ones either, so it's possible that this one isn't working. I'm gonna go back here and create a thread again. Try. And let's see. Over here in this WebSocket. Okay, I do get the post event. I think it's because I forgot to reload the server. So I just did that. That's why we're seeing these errors over here. There's a new socket connection over here that I'm going to have to listen to. It's usually the one in the middle. Okay, so I'm going to move my face over here right now, actually. That's just much better. Anyway, so if I edit this now, I won't get an event because I'm not subscribed anymore, right? If the server restarts, I'm no longer subscribed. So that's just an interesting limitation of this. We don't have persistence on on thread subscriptions. Okay, so if I edit it, it doesn't look like I got a notification for that. I do still get post, but I really am not getting edit. Why would that be? I think what happens when we edit is we're not actually getting the event on the parent UID. We are using parent UID, but that might not actually be defined. Oh, there's an error in my server console that says parent UID not defined. That's that's right here. So that's that would probably be why. Okay, so I need the parent UID of this thread, and it looks like I already fetched the thread, so I can remove that console log I accidentally left there a while ago and get it from here. That's excellent news. And then let's do that after the thing that does the check that is necessary to not throw 500 errors when something's not defined. And then I'm going to use this parent UID. We kind of need two events for this. When we edit a thread, if you're subscribed to a thread that has its own text edited, you want a message for that. And if you subscribe to a thread where a child thread has an edit, I guess you probably want to have that information. We could do this recursively too. We could go up the chain and notify all parent threads, right? When any subchild has been edited. I'm going to leave a to-do here though. And the reason is, so right now, if you've seen the last video, you know we don't actually allow further nesting than just that first level, because I'm not sure yet what the scaling ramifications are going to be. Technically, you could just put JSON objects in the text for your threads, and you can just reference other thread UUIDs. So in that sense, it's not even really necessary. I think I'm only going to enable it if there's some optimization that only we can do on the back end, something that app developers would not be able to do with what's already provided. A bit of a digression there, but I don't want to go up more than one level, so I'm gonna do I'm gonna call this child edited. If my keyboard will cooperate with me. Okay. Child edited. Or child edit. Okay. By parent subscribers. So we got parent UID and UID. That should be good enough. Okay, I'm gonna reload this. I'm reloading the server off to the side where you can't see. Let me check. Was I editing that in a place where it was visible? Okay, that's good. Okay, so I'm going to subscribe again. I'm subscribed. I'm going to edit that thread. I don't see a message from that. Oh, yes, I do. We got it. It seemed to have taken a moment, but I think that was because of a scrolling quirk in Chrome. I'm going to try it one more time. No, it does take a moment. Or at the very least, it seems to take a moment. I'm not actually sure what's up with that. That's very strange. And if I post, that happens right away, right? No, that also does not happen right away. I can't really see any rhyme or reason for the amount of time it's taking for me to get those messages, because I'm looking at the server console off to the side and it's not doing anything between the time that it finishes the thread operation, which takes basically no time at all, and when the WebSocket message comes in. So I'm going to ignore that problem for now and see what happens in staging, testing, and in production, and go from there.
And now, a single blooper.
And I'm about to do the first test, so I'm going to, and I'll re-record probably.
Generic transitionary clip.
Okay, so that was the addition of user information in threads and being able to subscribe to changes to threads over WebSockets. And these two things are going to enable me to finish building a chat app for Pewter. Thank you for watching, and I hope you found this video and its contents interesting or helpful.